Thank you for joining us for the Increase Market Customers and Sales session today. This is part of a webinar that's titled The Growing Sales at Farmers Markets. We're grateful to have Nancy Staisey with us today from the Historic Lewes Farmers Market as today's instructor. We greatly appreciate the support that's provided by USDA Rural Development to help make this series possible. And to help report the impact of this webinar, I'll ask you to complete a very brief online evaluation of the session at the end of the webinar. The link to the evaluation will be posted in the chat box for you at the end of today's webinar. So just a few housekeeping items. If you would please leave your microphones on mute and your video off during the session. And if you would now locate the chat box, it should be at the bottom of your screen. If you hover with your mouse over the bottom of your screen, you should see the chat. And so once you bring that up, if you'll type your name and location into the box to help me record attendance, that'd be really appreciated. And please note that attendance at all 4 webinars, today, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, will fulfill a Tennessee Ag Enhancement Program requirement in the agritourism, fruit and vegetable, and value-added producer diversification sectors. So if you want your attendance to be documented for Tennessee Ag Enhancement Program, please type in your name in the chat box as it would appear on TDA's list. If you join the session by phone, please let Erica Alexander at Tennessee Department of Agriculture know that you participated in this webinar by phone by emailing her at erica.alexander@tn.gov. So you can use the chat box at any time during the session to submit a question to everyone, or you can submit a question to me privately. And I'll be monitoring the chat box during the presentation, and so will Jared Bruin, who is actually in our office today. I'm working from home, and we've been directed to work in our homes during this virus situation, but Jared has gone into the office today to help folks with any troubleshooting issues that they may have in connecting to the webinar, and I really appreciate him assisting us in that and being a part of this program. As I mentioned, near the end of the webinar, I'll type in the chat box a link to the evaluation form with just a few short questions. And please note that I am recording the session, and we plan to post it online in the event that you'd like to view it again or share it with someone else. I'm really excited to have Nancy Staisey with us today. Nancy is passionate about using data and information to improve things. As a board member of the Historic Lewes Farmers Market in Lewes, Delaware, she asked the question, how can you increase sales at farmers markets and stands and attract more customers? And under a USDA Farmers Market Promotion Program grant, Nancy led efforts to make the Historic Lewes Farmers Market in Lewes, Delaware into a living lab to find out what really works to improve sales. Bringing together her background as a child on a small farm with her PhD from Carleton University focusing on statistics and methodology, her expertise as a consultant, and her experience managing farmers markets, Nancy has worked to develop evidence-based guidance for improving direct sales opportunities for sustainable farmers and communicating the value of markets. So today's session is going to share lessons learned from experimenting and measuring ways to increase sales and traffic at market stands, and we'll cover how you can find out what works best for you. So if there's no questions at this time, let's dive into increased market customers and sales. Nancy?
Thanks, Hal, and welcome to everybody who's joined. Originally, we hoped we'd all be in person, but I think this will work hopefully just as well. let me begin with a few more introductions. As Hal said, I'm Nancy Staisey, and I'm a volunteer on the board of the Historic Lewes Farmers Market. And as he said, led our efforts to really study what works to grow sales and what works to attract more customers to farmers markets. Now, let me also introduce our market. Now, you have to imagine a drum roll and fireworks going off because this is our 15th anniversary year. We never thought we'd be spending our 15th anniversary trying to figure out how we carry on under the current situation, but we will persevere, and I'm sure we'll see our way through this. Let me say a little bit more about the market. We're the oldest and the largest producer-only market in Delaware. And I know lots of people have different definitions of producer-only. By producer-only, we mean that the farmers and the producers who sell at our market can only sell what they actually grow or produce. We limit the amount of prepared food at our market, but we do sell coffee, and at 8 a.m., we all really need it. We're fortunate to have a cadre of over 100 volunteers. We're also a nonprofit and give back to the community in many ways. We operate our Saturday market from May to September, 8 a.m. to noon, and from October to November, 9 a.m. to noon. We have a Wednesday market that runs from May to August, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Now, you can see all of these different statistics up here. We are located in a rural town of 3,000, and it swells to 10,000 in July and August, counting the surrounding areas. And this is because we have a lot of tourism, and we're located within a couple miles of the beach. But in the end, it is local residents who shop for their weekly groceries who are really the mainstay of our market. Now, a few years ago, we were awarded a USDA Farmers Market Promotion Program grant to use our market as a living lab to explore how to grow farmers markets. And today what I want to cover is why we decided to do it, how we went about making our market a living lab, and then what we learned that we think can help you increase sales. And also I'll share some of the challenges we faced. Now, I really want this to be a time when we can all discuss how to grow sales. So please ask questions as they arise. You can type them in the chat box. And what I'll be doing is I'm going to be pausing several times during the presentation to try to cover questions that have come up. So don't be shy in terms of typing in a question as it occurs to you. Now, we began with a question, and that question was, what can we do to increase sales and attendance at our market? Now, it seemed like a simple question, but it quickly morphed into 4 questions because we were interested in not only looking at increasing sales and attendance overall, but also specifically in increasing sales involving SNAP and increasing attendance of SNAP recipients at our market. So we looked at all 4 of these questions. Now, we decided to focus on these questions because in recent years, we'd seen this national trend of a slowing in the growth of farmers markets. And at the same time, we were concerned that our sales, we saw our sales decline when we moved to a new location. And we were just beginning to feel that growth was becoming more difficult. So we really wanted to look at what could we do to do a better job at growing. Now, we know that successfully competing in this changing environment is necessary for the survival of farmers markets, but also for the survival of the many farmers and producers who depend on this important direct sales channel. We began by looking for answers to our questions, and what we found were lots and lots of opinions, a few surveys, but the surveys were mostly accounts of things. So, for example, I could tell you how many markets do demos, or what percentage of markets offer SNAP matching dollars, and so on. But it didn't really say much about what actually works and what the impact was of these different things. Now, on the other hand, there's a wealth of research from retail stores on how to increase sales and foot traffic through stores. But again, we found next to nothing on farmers markets. Now, when we stepped back and we looked at the markets we run, we realized that we had all of the building blocks in place to use our market as a site for experimentation on how to grow sales. We've got a strong cadre of volunteers, we've got years of data on sales and attendance, and we've got a team that's experienced in research. So we decided to use our market as a lab in which we could conduct research. We decided that we could test what works in farmers markets as opposed to retail stores to increase sales. Now, I'm using the word living lab, and it's probably worthwhile saying a little bit more about what we mean by that. We use it to mean an approach to experimentation that occurs in a real life setting, i.e. a farmer's market, as opposed to in a sterile lab. It involves users in the design of the research and uses kind of a co-creation or collaborative approach to developing and tweaking the ideas being tested. Before we look at what we found increases sales, I'm going to say a little bit more about how we went about making our market into a living lab. We basically followed 6 steps, and they're shown on the slide, to make our market a living lab in which we could test ideas and conduct research. First of all, we began with questions that we wanted to answer. And for us, those questions were how to increase sales and attendance, both overall and specifically with SNAP customers. Then we asked ourselves, well, what kinds of things do we think would really work in doing this? Now, we really wanted to know, did something work? And if so, how well did it work? So to measure the impact of any interventions we tested, we needed to have a baseline against which we could compare to say, how much of an impact did it really have? I should point out that although we began using statistical analyses to assess our results, we found that even fairly small impacts were statistically significant. So we decided to set the bar higher and focus on larger impacts that were meaningful to our farmers. For example, you might find that something was, quote unquote, statistically significant, but it increased sales by 0.5 percentage point. Well, if it took a couple hours to implement it, most of our farmers would say, that's not really worth it to me. So what we did was we often compared our sales to what our farmers were saying would be a meaningful impact. And we needed, as I mentioned, this baseline of comparison. So often what we did was we compared what happened to sales during a test at a market to what sales had been the week before and the week after when we weren't doing the test. In other cases, we compared what happened to the test to the same market week in the previous year. And yet in other cases, we did both. We compared the week before and the week after and the week the year before. We developed ideas to test, first of all, by asking for them. We asked our farmers, we asked our volunteers, we asked our board members. We also conducted an observational survey of our market and looked at things like signage and the design of displays. And I urge everyone to do it. It's funny, you think you know your market, but when you actually spend a market or two stepping back and looking at each stall or stand and saying, are the prices clear? Is there a sign indicating where this farm is located? What does the display look like? You really have different insights about your market. We also, though, looked at the research from retail store settings on how to improve sales and attract customers. So let me ask you the same question that we asked ourselves and our farmers who sell at our markets. And that is, what do you think would increase your sales? Now, excluding growing more to sell, okay? So if you hold that thought for a minute and come up with some of the ideas that you have, as we go through this, we'll see if we tested any of them. And if we didn't, we hope you'll test some of them. So in our search for what might increase sales, as I said, we gleaned ideas from several of the recurrent findings from research, especially in retail settings. And we considered these when we were designing our experiments, but also when we were interpreting some of the results that we got. And these are 5 key findings from retail research. First is reciprocity. And there's a reason stores give out coupons, because when you get something, there's a natural tendency to want to do something in return. And that something in return you usually do in a retail setting is buying something. So at farmers markets, this principle would lead you to, for example, give out samples. Next is commitment and consistency. When you get commitment from a shopper to buy from you, you will sell them more. And this is why frequent shopper cards are used. How many people, if we look at liking, how many people have ever entered a store at a mall, and you know how they position kind of a greeter near the door, and had that greeter compliment you? Oh, great scarf. Love your shoes. They do that because they've been trained to do this. Because research shows that people are more likely to buy from people they like. And we all tend to like someone who shows the good judgment to like us. Now, we wouldn't suggest that sellers at farmers markets should give out false compliments, but certainly smiling and talking to customers is one way of showing liking. Now, people are also more likely to buy what an authority or someone they respect or know recommends, or what is popular with others. This is why so many of us consult consumer reports before making a big purchase, or Yelp before picking out a restaurant to eat at. So Yelp reviews, foodie blogs, things you can do on social media are a great way to do this with farmers markets. Now, I'm sure you've got some of your own ideas to test, and you can use these steps to develop your own evidence-based insights. First, come up with a question you'd like to answer, and we've shown 2 examples here. One is the question we addressed, which was, how could I grow sales? But the second is an example that came up at one of our workshops, which was, how can I retain CSA customers year to year? Then design the details of, design the details of how you'd implement your test and calculate the impact. So here, with the CSA example, you might say, well, maybe if I offer a repeat customer discount, I'll get more returning CSA customers. And then look at what are you going to measure here? It's obviously the number of repeat customers. Now, originally we thought we'd be together and we would do this very interactively to try to build some of your own ideas to test. But I included these slides so that you could think through how you might test some of the ideas that you had in your mind originally. Now, I want to pause now and just see if there are any questions or discussion. I don't see any in the chat box. Now, you see, if we were face to face, if I left a really long pause, I know somebody would have a question. So if you do have one, please type it in the chat box. But I will carry on, and we'll see if there's some more questions later. So we came up with lots of ideas to test. And this led us to conduct a series of experiments to test the ideas that we thought might increase overall sales and attendance at the market as a whole. But we also had ideas that were intended to increase sales at a specific stall, or even increase sales of a specific product at a specific stall. Now, we were able to do all of this experimentation because we've been collecting a whole series of measures since our market began 15 years ago. Um, Now, I'm not going to go through each and every one of these, but you can see it's a long list. And at the right, you can see a picture of Carol Revak, who's one of our volunteers and a former board member. She's got a clicker in her hand, and we do counts by, quote unquote gate. We don't have a fence up, but there are three main access points to our market, and we have volunteers seated there with a little thermal bag where they have water in it, doing counts. We also count things like the number of children at our story time or the value of food we donate to charities. We glean at the end of the market and donate the food. And of course, we collect all of the information you might think you'd have on SNAP, WIC, and the seniors program, both the dollars spent and the number of tokens given out and the matches that we do. We do a $20, we match up to $20 per market per customer for SNAP. And this year we've added, we're going to do a match on WIC and the seniors coupons too. We also collect some information on the farmers who sell at our market, how many acres they farm, distance traveled to market. And then finally, we collect information on the weather on the day of the market and any special events in town, because we find this really helps us when we're trying to make comparisons. If we notice that, we're comparing to a week the year before when sales were really low, and we see, there was a hurricane and we didn't have as many people, that helps us understand it better. Now, I'll pause again because sometimes people have questions. I see one question on where do our funds come from to match on SNAP. We fundraise for this, and we also have managed to get some small grants from different community organizations. So we find that it's an area where we have people who are specifically interested in targeting their grant towards that. So we've had, like $1,000 grant from a local bank or from the Rotary, those kinds of things. How would someone accept and process SNAP, WIC, et cetera? We have a SNAP desk that handles all of this. And so they would go to the SNAP desk, they would swipe their card and say how many dollars they were planning to spend. And they would get wooden tokens for the number of dollars they were planning to spend. And then they would get a different color of matching tokens. And so we use this wooden token system. Now for WIC, I see there's questions about WIC and seniors. We spent a lot of time working out that process, and I actually wish our person who does it were here answering that question right now. But what they're going to do is, because there's a stamp that's going to be placed on the back of the WIC coupon, and that will have a date on it from the farmer, and then they'd get the matching tokens based on that. Okay, do you have a good way to determine what products customers want to buy? Well, I don't know whether it's a good way or not. I'll tell you how we try to determine it. One way is we have an information desk, and we often get people coming to the desk asking us, who is selling, fill in the blank this week. And sometimes they're asking us for products that no one sells. And then we let our farmers know that we're getting, for example, for a while, we're getting lots of requests for garlic. And we talked to several of our farmers who now grow garlic and are, making good money selling the garlic that they grow. We also sometimes, when we're losing a particular producer, and we know they've had very good sales, and we know they brought some product that no one else was bringing, we let our other farmers know that they won't be at the market the next year, and that they may want to consider growing this list of things that we saw had sold well. Is your WIC matching? Yes, the WIC matching and the seniors matching, it's all through fundraising and grants. So a potential customer paying for a farmer's market vendor would see you first. That if it's a potential SNAP customer or WIC or the WIC and folks wouldn't have to see us first, but if they wanted to get their matching coins, they'd have to come to see us. Do you have vendors display growing methods? Yes, and in a moment I'll show how we do that. And now some vendors obviously have information about this on their signs, but I'll show some cards little signs that we post on every stand that has some of this information. What kind of fundraising? Whatever we can come up with. We do an annual event, and this year, unfortunately, it didn't take place. It's a ticketed event. In previous years, we had done what we called a hoedown, and people dressed, a lot of people came in kind of Western garb, and we had a band and food, etc. And we also at the event have auction items. And many of the auction items are experiences or dinners. We also, as I mentioned, go for small local grants to help us. And we do an annual appeal letter to people who are on our mailing list. So I think if there's no more questions, I think that covers everything in the chat box, unless I missed something, Hal, and you can let me know.
I think you got it all.
Okie doke. So enough on background and how we tested the ideas. Let's look at what we found out from some of our experiments, okay? Now, it's a well-known principle in retail that people shop with their eyes. And when we spoke with farmers and did our observational study, we saw that customers often overlooked products that were being sold from freezers or coolers. And almost all of our meat, almost everyone selling meat is selling from freezers, and a lot of the kind of delicate products, greens, etc., are often in coolers. So we tested putting photos on coolers to show the product inside. You can see this blue cooler in the lower left-hand corner here. This farmer previously had, you can't quite read the little white sign that's taped to it that basically says arugula, and it says the price. Previously, they sold out of that cooler with just that sign on the cooler. And what we did was we took a photo of arugula in a salad bowl and taped that photo, we laminated it and put it to the front of the cooler and on top of the cooler. When we did this, the sales of the products in coolers or freezers increased by an average of 33%. So we did this with both meats and with arugula and some greens. Now, we typically took 3 types of photos of products in freezers or coolers. First is a photo of the product shown ready to eat, cooked if it was meat, made into a simple salad if it was something like the arugula. The second was a photo of the raw product. And then the third was what we called a whimsical photo. And here we show sausages formed into hearts. Now, we let the farmer choose which photo to use. And interestingly, and we thought different farmers would choose different photos and we'd actually be able to check which type of photo was most effective. Everyone chose the photo of the cooked or prepared food. And those all worked well, so they probably were making a good decision on that. But in the future, we are looking at potentially testing what type of photo works best. We also found that increasing the visibility of products not in coolers also improves sales. For example, one of our bakers found that removing their baked goods from the open top plastic tubs that they had been using and instead stacking them on their table increased sales. We found that the retail store expression of stack 'em high, see 'em fly holds true for farm stands too. The more bountiful and the cleaner the display helps sales. The fear, though, of having to take product back to the farm, we found led many of our farmers to be overly conservative in the amount of product that they bring to the market. So one issue that we faced in conducting our experiments was this challenge of measuring the impacts when farmers sold out of a product early in a market when we were testing an idea. And it just felt like no matter how many times we'd say, okay, we're doing this experiment, we're really finding that these typically really increase sales. Please bring more product than you typically think you would sell. They, just didn't bring more, or they brought just a little bit more. And that was an ongoing challenge as we did this. Now, I see a question: how do you mitigate health department regulations around food? We follow all of the health department regulations. So, and keep in mind, we have very little prepared food. So we haven't run into this as a problem. I'm not sure whether maybe you have different health department regulations where you are. But we haven't found that to be an issue. Now, another lesson learned was in operating, our living lab, was that how you actually implement an idea is as important as the idea. And I'm going to describe an experiment that we did that failed. And we saw this when we attempted an experiment on pricing. We were interested to see if more garlic would be sold when priced by the pound or when priced by the piece. But unfortunately, the farmer had placed garlic of various sizes in the basket that was being sold priced by the piece, and fairly uniform sizes of garlic in the basket where garlic was being sold by the pound. Now, so the basket where garlic was being priced by the piece, the largest bulbs were quickly purchased from that basket, leaving only little small bulbs being priced by the piece. And, literally you'd have to be insane to pay, by the piece for this little tiny piece of garlic when you could pay by the pound at something that had a more uniform sizes. So we weren't able to actually get any results from this experiment, but it's one that we're going to repeat and do properly. Now, recipe cards are seen at many farmers markets. And interestingly, when we asked our farmers what they thought would help them increase sales, the most frequent request was for help providing recipe cards. And when we had done our farmer orientation at the beginning of the season, we'd given everyone a little note card and said, give us your idea of what you think would increase sales. And we had, oh my gosh, it was like so many farmers saying they wanted recipe cards and wanted help doing them. So you can imagine our surprise when we tested the impact of providing recipe cards on sales and didn't find consistent increases in sales from adding recipe cards to a stand. Of all the things we tested, this was one of the least effective. But we did find that recipe cards could be made more effective based on how they were used. For example, they worked better with unfamiliar products. Also, we found that they were helpful to many farmers who often felt a little bit uncomfortable initiating interaction with customers. And this was really a way that they could open a conversation with them and say, oh, did you see my recipe on this? Or, and we know that one of the findings from the literature is that having that interaction with a customer can help increase sales. Now, one of the other findings from the literature in the retail settings is that people buy from people they like. Now, we've encouraged our farmers to help customers get to know and like them. And for example, we have posted what we call farmer profiles on tents. And someone asked earlier, do we have something about how farmers grow? And these profiles, which is the yellow card you see on the left, is where if they don't have it on their sign, we've encouraged them to say something. So this is the profile for Twin Post Farm. And we produced them for them, but we asked them to submit 1 or 2 photos that they'd like to show of their farm. And we asked them to give a short 1 to 2 sentences that communicates either how they farm or why they're passionate about farming. And then from everyone, we asked for the name of the farmers, few words about the practices they use, the farm size, and the distance they travel to the market. Now, when we began these, we found that absolutely everyone wanted them, which meant we couldn't really test the impact of adding them because we had trouble being able to just put them up on several stands and not on everyone. So we gave in and we did it for everyone. So we've posted these on everyone's tent. We also gave out name tags to our farmers and used what we called smile reminders. Now, as I said, all of these were used across the full market. So it's difficult to really test their impact. So we decided to test some additional approaches that aim to help customers get to know, like, and feel connected with the local farmers who grow and raise the food they eat. We scheduled a number of farmer presentations, and this allowed the farmer to talk to customers about their farm, how long they've been farming, and to demonstrate some of their products. So this is Henry Bennett talking about melons. And what we did was we then compared sales for the featured farmer on the day of their presentation to sales the week before and the week after. Now, we conducted 5 of these, and what we found was that sales increased hardly at all, like 1% on the day of the presentation. If we hadn't been looking closely at our time series data, we might not have noticed that the big impact was the following week. When we looked at sales the week after each presentation, we found that the sales increased an average of 41%. And then they also continued to be higher the week after that. Now, we realized that many of our farmers arrive at the market with a shopping list, and also that many of them have completed their shopping before attending this session and the demo. So we think that may explain why the increases in sales were seen the following week. Now, but remember, the average increase was 41%. The range went from minus 17% to an increase of 79%. Now, the one demo where the farmers' sales went down was the result of poor planning on our part. And that's because we did that Meet the Farmer session at our market on the 4th of July weekend. Now, this is one of our largest market days, and so it wasn't surprising that sales declined the following week. We also found that farmers who provided samples during their presentation tended to see the biggest impacts. Now, how many of you have participated in some kind of a loyalty program? I suspect lots. And at some point, we've all carried some little card in our wallet or purse where we're getting punches made in it to get something at the end of accumulating a certain number. Two of our farmers volunteered to test a customer loyalty program. And in one program, the farm stall provided punch cards, and a customer earned one punch for every $10 spent. And then when they reached $50 or had five punches, $50 in purchases or had five punches, they got a $5 credit at the stand. In the other loyalty program, and this is shown in the photo, the farmer initialed blocks on a card for every purchasing visit made to their stand. When the card had 5 initialed blocks, the customer's card was entered into a raffle to win a market picnic basket stocked with barbecue items for a group picnic, and the raffle was held at the last market day of the season. And here we, of course, have a sweet market child drawing the winner's name here. Now, when we asked the farmers about the impacts of the loyalty cards, both of them felt that their approach had boosted customer loyalty, especially in returning shoppers. The person who was doing a punch for every $10 spent also felt that it increased sales, in that someone who had pulled together $9 worth of product that they were purchasing would add one more item in to get the punch for $10. However, when we compared changes in sales during the year the loyalty program was in effect to sales during the previous year, when there was no loyalty program, we found conflicting results. Sales went up 39% in one case and went down 12% in the other. Now, obviously, many factors can increase sales each year. We knew that in the case in which the sales declined, the farmer had had some health issues, and he really wasn't able to bring as much to the market as he had in the previous comparison year. But we were still surprised by the size of the impact the customer loyalty program had had with the other farmer. Now, this is where having years of data is helpful, because what we did, this farmer had actually been with us for all, since the market began, and we had data on them since the market began. And what we could see was that this farmer had seen a slow, steady increase in sales that mirrored the increase in sales seen overall for our market over the previous 10 years. Now, with the only change in the test year being the implementation of this loyalty program, this farmer's sales jumped 40%, and our overall market sales, had only, I can't remember, I think it went up by 5% or something. So it was helpful to be able to look at that data and really understand what was going on and feel greater confidence in the impact of this customer loyalty program. Now, we also decided to do an experiment that we called market pairings. Now, our market pairings events involved a demonstration by a market staff person, a volunteer, or a board member. And we set up some rules for this. We were thinking of it as, coming up, as you have like wine pairings with food. This was like how you could pair two different products that were for sale at the market together to create something that you enjoy eating. So the rules for our market pairing demo were that the recipe demonstrated needed to use products from at least 2 different farmers. The products used needed to be for sale at the market that day, and the recipes had to be something that someone could make at home in 20 minutes or less. Now, we also encouraged people to highlight less common products in the recipe demonstrated. So we kind of encouraged people to try something different. Now, we did this very much on the cheap. You can see we had this poster, this banner printed that we put on the front of our market pairing table. And each week we would you can kind of see at the bottom, carrots, garlic. We just had some sticky sheets of paper where we would write the main ingredients that were in the recipe And underneath it, it would say, carrots from, and it would say the name of the stall we got the carrots from that we are using in the recipe, garlic from, etc. Cabbage from, I think this is a recipe for Vietnamese coleslaw. And then the other thing was the person demoing, these are basically people's neighbors doing the demo. So these are volunteers, or no one's a professional chef doing this demo. So at each pairing, we provided the recipes, we had the signing, listing the products that were being used and the market stalls where they could be purchased. And then everyone got a taste of the completed recipe. And we have a washing stand behind there. We follow all of the food and safety requirements for doing this. This boosted sales of featured products by an average of 20%. We even found that the sales continued, the improved sales continued into the following week. And we think this was so effective partly because in a way it was, if you think back to, people going to Yelp reviews, this is kind of like a third-party endorsement of a product. And it's an endorsement by someone, many people, it's their neighbor and they know the person. And in part because the recipes were more approachable than those offered by professional chefs who demo at the market. We have our local chefs do demos every week at the market, and we've been doing this for forever, so we really couldn't test the impact of it. Our belief, and it's an untested belief, is that these chef demos attract more people to the market, but we don't think they really have an impact on sales. And here you can see one of our local chefs who's demoing making ice cream using liquid nitrogen. So this is not exactly something that you'd go home and, leave the market and say, oh, I think I'm going to go home and, go find some liquid nitrogen and make my ice cream this way. The market pairings, on the other hand, used fewer ingredients. Everything was available. They could be made, here it says 30 minutes. We actually looked at all of our recipes, ended up being 20 minutes or less. And they were simple. Now, sorry, I'm going to go back one slide because I didn't mention one other thing. And that is that the products in our market pairings that were more unusual sold even more. So, the number that we showed an average increase in sales of 20%. One of the recipes we did was involved using a rosemary garlic jelly that was available from our jam and jelly producer on a ciabatta bun with a portobello mushroom that had been grilled. And this jelly sold more than double its typical amount. The sales continued the following week, and she kept not bringing enough jelly. She kept running out of jelly. So, when I say it was a 42% increase in sales, it would have been even higher if we'd had more of that jelly available for sale. So one of the things that was constantly front of mind as we conducted our experiments was the cost benefit of the things we tested. Because we know that like our market, other markets are always on tight budgets. So we pulled out 3 no or low cost ideas that we found to be the most effective. We believe, as I said, that one of the reasons our market pairings demo was so effective was that it involved someone who was known and trusted but had no self-interest in the farm that was selling the ingredients they were using. Secondly, photos on coolers and freezers really made a difference. And while the cost was about $25, and this is with a photographer taking the photos for free, once you laminate it, you have it, and you can keep using it over and over again. And it takes very little time to keep it going, unlike recipe cards that have to keep being changed and reprinted, etc. Finally, though, the cheapest and yet really effective action is to smile, be friendly, and engage with customers. Now, I I have to say, as we tried to test the impacts of smiling, we discovered that there are some people who are like natural smilers, and there are other people, no matter how many times we would like walk behind their thing and whisper, remember to smile, remember to smile. It just wasn't a second, it didn't come naturally to them. But all of the research says that if you smile and you're friendly, you'll have higher sales. Now, before moving on to our market-wide experiments, I'm going to pause again for questions on what we tested to increase sales at market stands. Let's see.
I think way back, Nancy, there was a question about when you mentioned health department rules, and they had a question about baked items. Of course, everybody's health department is going to vary even from county to county when it comes to sampling and some of those rules. But did you have any particular rules with your bread products or baked products that your health department expected you to comply with?
I don't want to say there are no rules, because I know there are rules, but we don't have any problems. Like they are permitted to display those products in the way in which they were displayed. They do, if there are flies and bugs around, place netting over it. And in terms of samples, we do have a requirement that if you're giving out samples, you have to get a permit from the health department. And I've done little demos myself and have had to get that permit. And you have to explain how you're preparing it. They may call you up and ask you questions, and then we have to have available a washing facility, and we're kind of compulsive about using. I know everyone now is using these anti-bacterial wipes, etc., of wiping down tables and the vinyl tablecloths that are on them. And so I'm not sure whether that covers it or not, but okay, then we have what's the best time of day to do a farmer's presentation, and how do you advertise it so people will want to come? We tend to do them at 10 a.m., which is kind of in the middle of our market. We haven't actually tried out different times to see if there's a better time. We did our market pairings demo earlier, simply because at 10 a.m. we either do a farmer presentation or a chef demo. And so we didn't want to have the market pairings conflict with that. And so at 9 a.m. we were doing the market pairings. We advertise it two ways. We do place an ad in our local newspaper, and typically we'll say, who the chef is or who's doing a demo that day. We, in addition, have a e-newsletter that we send out, and that will describe what's happening in the market. And then the final way is we have a volunteer who has a particular knack at getting on our microphone and drawing people in to sit down for the demo. And so she is wonderful. At times she speaks Italian and says, buongiorno, and, something or other, if it's an Italian, if it's a Italian restaurant that's doing it. So we actually, I don't want to say we have a barker, but it's, it's like having someone who actually announces it. And I guess the other thing we do is, as you enter the market, we have a sign that says what's on, and it's a chalkboard sign that says what's on in the market that day.
Hey, Nancy Herndon, you mentioned the
I'm
I guess,
sorry, we're
percentage
having
of our
trouble hearing
exhibitors
you, Kenny.
are Amish and Mennonites. All right, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Now we can hear you.
Hello?
yes, we can hear you.
Okay. In our market, we have a large number of, or large percentage of either Amish or Mennonite exhibitors. How did you do the Know Your Farmer with them? Because
Uh,
I'm assuming they wouldn't want pictures of them.
Okay, you broke up a little bit, but let me repeat the question, and as I think I heard it, and that is, if you have a large number of Amish or Mennonite farmers selling at your market, how do you do the, get to know the farmer with them? First of all, we don't have any. We're in the southern
Right.
part of Delaware, and in the northern part, especially not actually in Delaware, but in southeastern Pennsylvania. It's a very, very large Amish community. So we didn't run into that problem. But I have to say, there are some people who aren't as interested in doing it, and we didn't do it with everyone. You had to be willing to stand up and do a presentation. Now, that said, I have been at presentations by an Amish farmer who was growing, uh, 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 who's certified organic, and he certainly did a full presentation. So, you know, uh, it may be more individual differences that we're talking about here. Now, someone asked the question, and this is just a fantastic idea. And you already have me like thinking I'm going to call the mayor to do one of these. Did you include any, quote, celebrities, unquote, from the local community in the market pairings? We had a couple people who I would say would be fairly well known, but we didn't. I think it's a great idea to think of having the mayor or one of our coaches or someone like that come and do one, and I'm going to take that idea away. You mentioned a microphone with announcements. Do you have music playing through your audio as well? We have very strict rules in our community and around noise and amplification. So we do not have live music at our farmers market. There is one market a year where we're allowed to have live music, and that's because the community next to us has a jazz festival, and we're allowed to have a jazz musician at the market the weekend of the jazz festival. We do have a noise permit to use a microphone and amplification for our demos. We're in a park, but we actually have to point the loudspeaker towards the pond and in the direction where there are no houses, so that only people really in the local, who are there for the market kind of hear it. I'm not sure what community as in town/city or as in market means. Oh, I love the unsung heroes. Wow, you guys are giving me all kinds of great ideas here. Any other questions before I move on? Okay, what I'm going to move on now are things that we did that were market-wide experiments. And several of our market-wide experiments involve testing the effect of promoting special days at the market. And in each case, the special day increased attendance by between 2 and 13% and increased overall sales by between 3 and 5%. Now, we also typically featured the products from a few farmers on each special day. And this increased the featured farmers' sales that week by between 6 and 30%. For example, we held a customer appreciation day at which we thanked customers as they entered the market. And in the center here, you can see very inexpensively had these little stickers printed up that said, "I am appreciated by the HLFM," standing for Historic Lewes Farmers Market. And we had greeters at each gate, and we put those on everyone as they entered, and we, stuck it on them. And we had the greeter, thank them for, coming to the market and supporting the market. And we also offered free samples that week of apple cider and vegan brownies. And that drove up the sales of the producers who offered those by 7 to 8% that day. Now, we typically featured the products from a few farmers on each special day and saw sales increase for those featured products. So on our first Kids Day that we held, one of our farmers donated blueberries as a snack for the kids. And we saw the sales of their blueberries that day increase 27%. On our second Kids Day, a farmer donated strawberries as a snack for the kids. But she only saw her sales increase by 6%. Now, this gets at another one of our measurement challenges. On our first Kids Day, the farmer who donated the blueberries was the only farmer with blueberries for sale at the market that day. On the second Kids Day, it was strawberry season, and many stalls were selling strawberries at the market. So the free snack may have increased sales across multiple stalls, resulting in a smaller increase for the farmer who donated the strawberries. Now, I didn't list every special day that we tested, but we also did an over 55 day. We did in partnership with our local hospital. We did the name of the hospital is BB, and we did a BB Health Day where they provided nurses to do a basic screening of blood pressure and sugar and cholesterol. So we did a variety of other days that aren't listed here. We couldn't fit everything on the slide. Now, we've questioned for a while which advertising channels were the most effective use of our very limited advertising dollars. So we decided to test the two main ways in which we advertise our market. The first is through ads in our local newspaper that's called the Cape Gazette, and the second through our e-newsletter. And so to test where more of our customers got their information, we held a free raffle. We got a local restaurant to donate dinner for 4. And we advertised the raffle in the newspaper and in our e-newsletter. But we used a different secret phrase in the ad in the newspaper from the ad in the e-newsletter. So the ad in the e-newsletter said that if you said the secret phrase of "eat fresh, eat local," you'd get 2 entries into the raffle instead of just 1. And in the newspaper ad, we said, if you said the secret phrase, "no farms, no food," you'd get 2 entries into the raffle instead of 1. So this let us, based on what secret phrase people used, we found twice as many people mentioned the newspaper secret phrase. Now, I share this not to say, okay, we should all conclude that print advertising is better than online. It's more that this is a way in which you can, in a fairly inexpensive way, compare different advertising channels that you're using. Now, we undertook a whole series of actions to try to increase SNAP use at our market. First, we tried to increase awareness that the market accepts SNAP and that we're offering matching dollars of $20 per market per customer. And we did this by having someone go out to meet with community organizations and to explain the program and to leave behind bilingual information cards. So they met with people at churches, at social services, the library, a whole variety of places. Second, during 2 of our special days that we held at the market, we did a free $5 in SNAP tokens. So on our Kids Day, we gave any kid, any child who attended an elementary school in our area and was accompanied by an adult with an EBT card, and the adult didn't have to swipe their card or spend any money from it. If they just came to the desk, showed an EBT card, and they had a child in tow, that child got $5 in free tokens. During our Seniors Over 55 Day, we did the same thing for anyone over 55 with an EBT card. And we did this because we were getting feedback when we went out to community groups and talked about the matching dollars. We were getting feedback that, the expression, if it's too good to be true, it's not true, or there's a hitch to it somewhere. We were getting feedback that many people thought that this $20 match, that something was fishy about it, that, you couldn't actually be giving $20 of extra food. And we had found that once we got people to our SNAP desk and could explain the program to them, and they used it once, they tended to come back. So we were doing these free $5 in tokens to try to get more people in and to the desk so that we could speak to them and really explain the program. We were concerned that the location of our market, and our main Saturday market is a bit of a walk from public transportation, made it difficult to access by EBT card holders. So we started a second, somewhat smaller Wednesday market that's situated closer to a bus route and closer to affordable housing. The results were dramatic. We saw a 57% increase in new SNAP customers and attracted almost the same number of new SNAP customers again the second year. And overall, the number of SNAP customers attending our market grew by 24%, and SNAP dollars increased by 31%. Now, we can't really say how much each of these specific actions that I've described on the previous slide contributed to this growth, but we do know that a third of the growth in new SNAP customers came from our new Wednesday market. And that when we asked new SNAP customers how they heard about us, our local public library was most frequently mentioned. And I think we've gotten feedback that for many people today, if you've lost your job, and many people do not have access to Wi-Fi and computers, it's the public library that they go to write their CV or to look online for jobs, etc. And that's where they would see our SNAP posters and information. Now, I'll tell you that the following year, SNAP sales at the Wednesday market increased from the previous year by almost 70%. And WIC checks spent at that market increased by 44%. So we continued to see, and last year we continued to see increases, but they were somewhat smaller, and we didn't have our person going around speaking to community groups last year. So what's next for us? Well, we plan to continue to experiment at our market, and we hope many of you will too. And we would love for you to share with us any experiments you do and what you find. I'm going to move to the last slide because you can download our full report at www.historiclewesfarmersmarket.org. It's a lot to type in, but if you go there, you'll be able to download the full report that has some additional information. And you're certainly welcome to contact us at info@historiclewesfarmersmarket.org, or we have our phone number down there. Now, let me go back to other questions. Um, you scan up here. Um, Someone's asking about the strict rules about noise. And yes, we have extremely strict rules. And the fact that we're only, our market is only using the amplifier for about 1 hour or an hour and a half. We don't, uh, sometimes we use it when we're doing the market pairings, but more frequently people are just speaking and people can hear them. Have we ever done a pet adoption day? No, we haven't. Um, and the question was, and this is okay. So if a family with SNAP came in with 4 kids, each child would get $5. Yes, you are correct. And we fundraised to be able to do it. Now keep in mind, we only did that for one market day. It's not every week. The question about SNAP versus WIC. WIC is a coupon book, so there isn't a card that's being swiped. For SNAP, you need to have the terminal and run it. But keep in mind, we do it centrally. Each farmer isn't swiping the EBT cards. We do it at our SNAP desk and then convert that into the wooden coins. Okay. Any other questions? So it looks like you may have a card option for WIC. That's interesting. I didn't. There's a question to the group of what company do people use for EBT? We got ours originally through a program that I was run through a grant through Farmers Market Coalition. And we have an answer. Total Merchant Services is what people are using. And yes, that special EBT terminal is different from just scanning a credit card. So you couldn't use like a Square attachment to your phone or anything like that. It's a special terminal. Someone has a terminal that does credit card and EBT. Where on your website is the full report? If you just do a search on our website for Living Lab, it should come up. We tried to get it. Oh, there. Someone has posted the direct link to it. And I'm just reading any other comments here. So, I wanted to say two other things maybe. One is, it surprised us how easy it was to do these experiments. We thought it was going to take like people with research skills and blah, 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 blah. And we find now that many of our farmers are just doing their own little experiments and are continuing on, which we think is great. Now, someone asked, I think, about activities on Kids Day. We do a series of activities on our Kids Day because our market our Saturday market is in a public park. We plant a tree every year in that park, and we fundraise to plant that tree. And we dig the hole and have someone kind of holding the tree up in the hole, and the kids get to throw the dirt on. And it's great because we now have kids who are coming back, and they think of it as like their tree in the park. We also do an activity that's a scavenger hunt, and we typically have a kids activity. So, for example, one year we did salad on a stick, and we prepared, pre-prepared, because with health and safety, everything had been pre-chopped the morning of and placed in plastic bags, and the kids were each given a little skewer to put vegetables and cherry tomatoes on, and then they were given a little cup of a yogurt ranch dressing to dip it in. And it was interesting because I was amazed how many parents, now you're going to hear I mean, I feel like I'm an old crotchety person now, in my day. I was amazed how many parents would hover over their children, saying that their child wouldn't eat certain things that were in the bag of stuff they were putting on their skewer. And so we would always ask parents if there were any allergies. So we'd, be careful not to have give any child anything they might be allergic to. But we had lots of parents who would say that their kids won't eat tomatoes. And as soon as they'd see their child like taking a cherry tomato out of the bag to put on the skewer, they'd be going, crazy behind them saying, no, he won't eat tomatoes. And we had one little boy who, it was a yellow kind of cherry tomato. And he was taking it out of the bag, and the mother was mouthing that he won't eat tomatoes. And I said, is it an allergy? She said, no. And so he picks up and he said, what is this? And I said, well, put it on your skewer, and we're going to see what you would name it. And so he puts it on his skewer, and he starts eating it, and he takes a big bite of it, and he eats it. And I said, so what would you call it? And he said, well, I'd call it yellow sunshine. That's what I'd call it. And his mother said, well, it's a tomato. And he was shocked and said, well, maybe I do like them. So we have learned to encourage kids to try things on Kids Day. And we have the second year we did it, we had a special board up. It was the Double Dare board. So when someone said they wouldn't eat something, we would double dare them to try it. And after they tried it, they could put a mark whether they liked it or not, whether they liked it or didn't like it, and then what they would name it. And that got the kids very involved in trying new things. Okay, I'm looking to see if there are any other questions here. Yes, so the question is, so vendors are reimbursed rather than required to directly accept those payments? Yes, we, at the end of the market, someone from the SNAP desk walks the market and collects all of the tokens from each stand. We record those, and then depending upon how many they have received, if it's, I can't remember this, I think it's over 10, if it's over $10, we'll cut a check for them that week. Otherwise, we may wait 2 weeks for them to collect enough to make it kind of worth the effort of sending them the check, and they seem fine with that. I think there's a question, how about whether the chat will be saved?
Right. There will be a chat file that I'll have access to, but I'm not sure if that's going to show up when everybody watches their recording. If you want to watch the recording, so I can provide the information that's needed from that chat box. If folks want to just get with me, I'll be glad to provide the information needed.
And the WICs are printed vouchers, and yes, we train our vendors in how to receive these and stamp them for deposit, and they are the equivalent of a check. Um, the other thing that we do is, I mentioned we do uh, we glean at the end of the market. So at the end of the market, we have a volunteer who basically goes from stand to stand and collects any food that a particular market stall would like to donate. And we record that, and we give them a charitable receipt for that, which I guess under an old tax system had been more helpful maybe than it is right now. But we then donate that fresh food to a local shelter. Any other questions or comments? Well, I hope you found it helpful, and would have loved to have been in Tennessee with you all, but it's been great being able to just communicate through through Zoom. There's a question of how do you think COVID-19 will affect the markets this year? First of all, I think it's going to have a big impact. We in Delaware currently, our markets are currently closed by order of the governor, and they're closed until May 15th. I'm doing a presentation tomorrow, and I've skinnied that presentation down a bit to allow time at the end of the presentation to have a COVID-19 discussion. And I've invited the president of our market, Helene Harris, to join us. We've been involved in looking at different guidelines for COVID-19 and for farmers markets. And I know Helene was involved in working with the state of Maryland and the state of Delaware in Maryland, the organization's called CASA, Chesapeake Alliance for Sustainable Agriculture, on developing a set of guidelines. But we've also been on innumerable calls, et cetera, and Zoom conferences around how different markets are responding. And so we'll have more time tomorrow to talk about that. So I hope many of you will join tomorrow. And tomorrow we're talking about how you can communicate the value of your market. And certainly that has changed significantly with COVID-19. We have always talked about our market as a great meeting place, you know, the hub of the community where people see one another and chat and talk, and, you know, et cetera. And, you know, getting close, large crowds, these are not the things we want to communicate right now. So.
Okay, well, thank you, Nancy. We really appreciate you sharing this important information in this webinar today. And as Nancy mentioned, we had reserved this week for some face-to-face workshops with her coming to Tennessee, and we were going to offer those workshops for farmers market managers. But as this COVID-19 arose, we decided to offer the workshops as a webinar series and open it up to everyone, not just farmers market managers. I'm really glad we did that, because many of the things that Nancy has to share are useful to not only managers but also vendors. So I think this has really worked out well, Nancy. So and I want to give a shout out to the Tennessee Association of Farmers Markets. We really appreciate their support for this program. And I know Casey Hare is the president of the Tennessee Association of Farmers Markets, and she's been on the webinar today. So we encourage all of you, if your farmers market is not a member of the Tennessee Association of Farmers Markets, we hope you'll consider joining. And we hope everybody will join us tomorrow when Nancy's going to be back with us to talk about communicating the value of your farm and your farm products. And again, we appreciate you being with us, everyone, and we ask that you complete the brief online evaluation at the link that's in the chat box. Are there any other questions, Nancy, that you see there that you want to take a stab at, or have we covered everything?
I don't see anything. There is a request for a link to the Tennessee Association of Farmers Markets, and I assume you can provide that, Hal.
Yes, I know that if you Google, I think just TAFM, I think will bring it up. If not, you can spell out Tennessee Association of Farmers Markets, and you'll find the link there.
And there's a concern about improper food preservation, and then other illnesses from contamination. We have folks from the state who visit our farmers markets, and they come with a thermometer and they're testing the the temperature at which eggs are being stored, and those kinds of things, and walking the market. We two other things that we do are we visit every farm before we accept them as a vendor at our market. And so we're looking at the farm first of all, because we're a producer only market, we really want to have a good sense of what they actually grow and produce. And secondly, we're looking at how they prepare food to come to the market in terms of their washing station, et cetera. And we also require everyone to have gotten the first level certificate in terms of food safety. So those are three of the things we do to try to ensure that everything at the market is safe and that food's being handled properly. And I think that's the.
Yeah, and one thing I'd like to mention is on Thursday, Mike Brown from the Tennessee Department of Agriculture is going to be talking about food manufacturing regulations. So I think you'll find his webinar useful on Thursday. Okay, well, I think that is about it. Thank you again so much, Nancy, for joining us.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye-bye.